So let's talk the three main components that make up this automated drop hunt. I went a little overboard, so you don't have to do everything here, but I hope this serves as some inspiration in your drop hunt of what you want to do. The three parts here is I had something that gets revealed. So in this case, it's the 3-axis skull that talks to you. The second part is the drop haunt itself, so the thing that will be hidden and then get itself revealed that has a magnet built in. And then the next part, the last part, the cylinder that brings up, there we go, the drop. So for me, I wanted to automate a drop down and reveal something, and those are the three parts of my automated drop down. Okay, so I had to do a little bit of work on this drop haunt, and I wanted to kind of take you through some of the areas here before I assemble it again. And I think that's a good thing to point out, is I try to make it so that if I needed to work on it, I could take bits and pieces of it out so I could get to certain things. Like this plexiglass can be replaced. This comes out, there's a shelving unit down here, and then that's where all the pneumatics go. So if I need to work on it like I needed to work on it now, I just bring it out, take it out, fix it, put it back, and we're good to go. So let's go through it. Okay, so things are starting to come together. Here's the little shelf that holds all the electricals for some of the stuff like the magnet and the 3-axis skull. You You've seen some of this before. We'll talk about it in a little bit as soon as I get it hooked up. Just wanted to point out, I like to use Tupperware to store a lot of things and label a lot of things too with what they are. Sound amp plug. And then here's my other container that I've drilled holes into to feed out the wires. There's better options, I'm sure. This works for me, and it stores everything like the amp, the boo box, some of the power cords, some of the tools that I need. So I can carry everything, I can transport it, it's all wrapped up, and then I know where everything is and how to unpack everything. So I know this is just me hooking it up to show you guys and to demonstrate it. There's a lot of wires here. Please don't get overwhelmed. Trust me, once you start to do this yourself, you'll know where all these wires go. So I apologize for the mess of wires here. But I want to let you know that if this looks too overcomplicated or anything like that, it's not. Once you start to do this component by component, section by section, and you learn these things, this becomes really, really easy. You'll start to say, oh yeah, I know this is, or oh, I can hook this up for that. So don't be worried, guys. I know things are tight, so I'm gonna try to give you an individual breakdown of all the pieces inside the drop hunt here. So we're gonna start first with the magnet, because I wanna show you where this connects to the drop itself. So that magnet is attached, the meat of it, the part that's actually the magnet is attached to this part that is the base for this skull. This part lives in here, and I try to keep this out of the weather. I try to keep it out of the cold as much as I can, just because it is an electronic piece. And there's the switch to it right there. So that's the power that goes to it. Like I'll mention before, and I'll probably say it again, this magnet is basically, when it's on, it's a magnet. When it's off, when there's no power to it, it's not a magnet. And that's the whole part of how the drop hunt works. When it rises up, I turn the magnet on, and that particular drop hunt works because there's the other part of the magnet. So that will connect to this magnet right up there. You can see the strips, and that's how it works. It'll rise up, the magnet will be on, and it will get connected. And then when I remove power from it, this drops down. Let's look at another component here. So there's the skull. I also have some plexiglass in front of the skull, just because this skull is rather expensive. They run between, I think it's like $800 to a little over $1,000. This is a 3-axis skull from Haunted House Creations. You can get it on Fright Props as well. And it has the RGB eyes, it has the 3-axis movement, so that means neck, so it can rotate, and it can also angle the neck, and then the jaw moves as well, so those 3 axes. And here is it. This is it. There's all the components in here. It comes, everything is all assembled, and I have an unboxing and tutorial about this in my other videos, so check that out. So this gets basically threaded onto this pole right here. Whoops, there's some tape. And fits right into this wooden block where the magnet is, and this is where it stays. It's stationary, and the skull will move on its own. This whole skull is hooked up via DMX, so I'm running a DMX basically input or to it, and it's telling it what to do, where to move, how to talk, what RGB the eyes should be, all that stuff. So that sings along to the song, and that's the whole point of this drop hunt, is it drops down to reveal this skull singing along to music. So we saw the skull, we saw the magnet, all that stuff. Let's talk about this little shelf. This shelf is removable. I needed something here. I needed something to house these things that were close to the skull and to the magnet. So that's all this is. Please don't be overwhelmed by the wires. I swear they come with the skull itself. They just hook in here. So for example, one of these is like the jaw, the other one is the eyes, so they hook in. This is the power to it. All these things are pre-done for you. So again, don't be overwhelmed by that. If you see that and say, oh my gosh, I can't do this, you can absolutely do this. The other part here is the power for this magnet. And all this is hooked up to a relay. And relays might be scared, whoops, there we go. Scared to like a scary, overwhelming thing. Trust me, it's not. You can get relays on Fright Props or on eBay or some of the electrical places. All a relay is it's basically saying, you know what, this circuit is normally open or normally closed, NC or NO. And all that is basically saying if it's normally closed, the circuit is closed. There's power going to this device. device. And if it's normally open, it means that it's normally open or the circuit is broken. There is no power going to it. And all that is basically sending the boo box right down there, is sending a signal saying, listen, you know what? You gotta be closed or you gotta be open. And that's how I control this magnet so that power gets to it or power doesn't get to it through that relay, which goes to the boo box. Let's talk pneumatic cylinder. This is an air cylinder that I got from Freight Prop, so you can see the little logo there. And this one happens to be 14 inches long because I knew I needed 14 inches to go from here to up to the top to push it. I think it's like 13.5. So I got a little bit more just in case. This cylinder itself is 3/4 bore. So all that means is this cylinder itself is 3/4 inches, I believe, in diameter. And it's a thinner one just because this guy is light. Like I said, it's about 1 to 2 pounds. So I just needed a smaller cylinder from a bore size, but just very long to pull that up. So push it up, I should say. And the big other thing here about the cylinder is it's double action. So there's an air line here and an air line here. And all that means is it can push things and it can also pull things. And all I needed was something to get pushed and then go back down. If it's a single action, sometimes it has a spring and it's not gonna go down, but I just needed that double action just in case to push it up and then to go down on its own. And so that is the cylinder itself. You can see those two air lines, and where this goes is it goes in here. And basically, cylinder is great, but you need something to control it. So this is a 4-way, 5-port, so 4 ways, 5-port solenoid. So all this does is take the air that comes in and it basically says, hey, I want to turn it on or I want to turn it off. I'm doing it manually with this little button here. But see, you can see there's power to this. So it goes all the way, you guessed it, to the DMX. So I can control this through the DMX and basically say, you know what? I'm going to turn it on for 8 seconds, push it back up, and then turn it off, and it goes back down. So all that is a solenoid. So basically think of it as a relay, but think of it as it's just basically turning on and off air. And you can see that there's air lines going in and the exhaust ports for the air to come out. Because somewhere this air needs to get out once it starts to go down. So this is those exhaust ports. You can silence them. I just have a couple of polyurethane air tubing that I just put in there. So there is the air cylinder that controls or automates the drop haunt along with the 4-way, 5-port solenoid. Just 2 quick notes here around the solenoid and the air valves and stuff. I have a controller here about what air should be coming in here. I'll show you the air compressor, and it's a bigger one. So I wanted to make sure that the only amount of air that goes into this is right around 20. I found that 20 PSI, a little bit over, is all it needs to control it. And what I'm hoping to do is grow my pneumatics. So I just got a bigger air compressor so that I could control multiple pneumatics from one air compressor. So all I did here was hook up this air line. You can get this also on Freight Props. You can go down to your local hardware store to get it. And all it's doing is taking the air that's coming in and saying, listen, I only want 20 PSI. So you could run a lot more PSI from your compressor. The other part are these really cool connectors. So some people will solder, some people will do temporary connections. Think of this as those little tiny plastic caps that you would screw around electrical connections. These are really great because they have these little switches here, these little orange things. You can flip it up and all that does is release the wire, and when it's closed, when you push them down, then it's closed. And I like these because they're waterproof, they're nice and short and small. And if I ever need to get to this or disconnect it, I can easily disconnect it. I don't have to break solder. So you'll see a couple of these hanging out everywhere. I just like to have that ability to disconnect them if I need to, but I need the strength of it here. So it needs to really be a strong connection, but also the ability to disconnect it. So I'll put a link. This is the actual drop itself. Here, I'm gonna get it out. This is what you see in the front, and then in the back, magnet part. And here is the new piece that our great friend Ian, I'll put his Instagram profile in the bottom here, made, because I had made one out of wood and it broke last year. There was a weak spot right there, right where I milled this out. Here, there we are. There he goes. And because of the cold and some of the extreme weather that we had last year, this snapped in half. So I was gonna get some thicker wood, and honestly you could use metal, aluminum, or whatever you fancy. I particularly like to use wood just because I'm more comfortable with it. And I was gonna do this, but our great friend Ian, he made this for us. And I'll see if I can get the file. Okay, let's talk about this little thing right here. I'm using the same bolts as I'm doing in the mausoleum as the cemetery fence right in this one, so it bolts this piece together, this magnet. This is that base piece that will flop down and will get hit over and over again, and then you can see there's a little ledge for this sign. I wanted to try to make this as light as possible so that the cylinder, the pneumatic cylinder, didn't have to do a lot of work. So that's why it's so thin and why it's held together the way it is. Bolts and some screws in the front for this guy, so if I ever need to take them off, I could always take them off. And of course, if I want to take the magnet out, I can unscrew the bolt. There we go. Let's talk a little bit more about the drop itself. So now that you see it inside, couple things. I knew the height, I knew how much it needed to drop from that to see still the skull, but to be right below it. I knew where it needed to drop to. I needed to know where the cylinder and how far the cylinder was to where it needed to be pulled back up. I just didn't know how to get it there, how to stay there, and how to automate this thing so it could drop 500 times every night and be consistent. So a couple of things I want to point out. Big shout out to Taylor and the Nightmare Circus crew for helping me through this. I wasn't really sure how to connect the dots here for making an automated drop, but let's walk through this drop specifically. I made some rails. They're just wood. When I say rails, they're literally just wooden blocks, 1x3s, that will just keep this from falling too much. But it also gives it a guide so that when it pushes it up well, and then when it falls all within the same kind of space. So that's a little bit about this drop. Let's look into the other little bits and pieces of this automated drop haunt. So let's check out the text here. So this is that wooden panel right here that screws into the 3D printed block. And I wanted it to start very large, Menace Manor, a little bit smaller, Open Dust to Dawn, and then tiny, tiny, tiny bit. So the closer you start to read it, the closer you start to have to get, and then I'm hoping that it will drop when you're starting to read that. So this basically says, if you are close enough, the ghost host can grab you. There we go. So we got a lot of people. They would read that, they would laugh, and then this thing would drop down and sing along to the song. So just a really fun little scare. And a lot of people had so much fun watching this. Some quick tips here. When you're doing this, when you're building, when you're looking at a drop haunt, there's a couple of things. Guides are always good. So I put some guides up in here with wood. I put some guides so that when this drops, it drops the same place every time. Another tip here is try to make things as simple as possible, okay? The simpler it can be, the more you can run this over and over and over again. This thing drops like 500 times a night, and I want to keep it. I want to keep it for years. The other part I wanted to talk about too is just like make sure that things are protected. So whether it's the actor that's doing the drop, whether it's an automated thing, in this case, I got some plexiglass. I wanted to make sure that no one's hands got in the way, none of the public were able to reach in and grab this because this is just so delicate in some cases with the solenoids and stuff. So plexiglass or safety is another big thing. So if you're doing this drop haunt for someone like an actor or some automated thing that will be shown in the public, just see how you can make things safe and make things out of the way so that no one gets hurt. Okay, let's talk about this Boo Box. So this is the Boo Box Flex Max right here. I show it off in the 3-axis skull video so you can check it out. And I go through some tips and tricks about how to remove these little guys and how to hook them up. So check that video out if you want it. This is a great tool that you can get this from Fright Ideas or Fright Props. And the Flex Max basically gives you 16, you can choose them. I chose for the max one, 16 outputs. So you can control things like I'm controlling the pneumatic, the actual cylinder, I'm controlling the drop haunt. You can see some lightning here. I'm doing the DMX, I'm doing the audio. So this is like your one-stop shop. This controls my whole thing, the whole graveyard setup, so that I can just plug in a USB card, let it go, and then it'll loop loop around and do its whole thing. So I can control this and program it on a computer using some free software that they give you called Director. So this is the brains of the operation. I keep it in this Tupperware container. I'm sure you can get better Tupperware containers or waterproof containers. For me, this works because it's stackable. I have a bunch of other ones that will house things and use it for storage. But for me, I just drilled some holes so that you can bring out the wires here. And it's out of the weather because it's in one of the columns. So I don't need it to be extremely waterproof so it gets the job done. I could put the top on it and then it basically is used as storage all throughout the year just to store all these components as well. But this is the brains of it. It all runs off of a little USB card right here. There it is. And I put the whole show on these USB cards and I could swap out shows if I want. Whoops, develop new shows and then be able to swap them out and put it into the Boo Box. So this Boo Box controls everything that we're looking at today. Okay, just another breakdown here, give you some ideas about how this works without all the things dropping and things like that. I wanted to kind of point it from the Boo Box and kind of show you what happens when I programmed it. So all that's happening here is there's a couple of inputs hooked up. You have the drop down itself, you have the actual air cylinder, and then you have some lightning. I didn't plug in the lightning because it's not related to the drop on. The other part is the DMX. Of course, we have some music, so everything is synced to that music. What I mean by that is I timed everything so that it goes along with the music. So what happens is when the drop haunt wants to do its thing, when we want to drop down the window, this sends a signal to the relay that I talked about. That relay says, you know what? No power. So when we remove the power to this, that window drops down. And when that window drops down, there's a reason. I want something to happen. I want the skull to sing along to the song. So the DMX signal sends a signal, goes right in here to this servo DMX, and it sends the signal to the skull. And I've pre-programmed some things, the head movements and the jaw to move and the eyes, and it sings along to the song. And then when that's done, I want the drop itself to be brought back up so it can start all over again. We could do that whole process again. So what happens is this cylinder sends a signal to the solenoid right here. And think of it as kind of like a relay for air. And it basically says, you know what? Turn on some air to it. So air goes on, brings back the drop, and then goes back down. Obviously the magnet's not on, but it would go right up, connect to the magnet, and then we've completed the kind of the circuit of the drop haunt. It dropped down, the skull sang its song, then we had the cylinder push it back up, the magnet gets turned on, and then we can repeat that process. And the whole part of that was so that the public could enjoy this. So someone could come up, a whole family, they could read the little, text that I have, it drops down, it sings along with the song, they laugh, they maybe get scared, and it goes back up, and then the couples, or families could leave, and the next couple comes up and it drops down.
I'll leave you with this fixed shot of the drop haunt in motion. If you like this video or other ones, or want to see more things, let me know in the comments below. That does it for this build overview. If you want to see more videos, you can check them out here or go on my YouTube page. And until next time, happy haunting.